Headmaster. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear students, in the last period we have finished beautiful poem Rain on the Roof. Now we will see another beautiful chapter, A Truly Beautiful Mind. Open your textbook on page 46. Now before that, you may tell me, do you know the laws of motion? Yes, do you know the laws of motion? Who made it? I think 3 laws were there. What was the name of that scientist? You tell me after finishing the chapter. I read on page 46. Keep ready your textbook. Be in attentive mode. Albert Einstein was born on 14th March 1879 in the German city of Ulm, without any indication that he was destined for greatness. On the contrary, his mother thought Albert was a freak. To her, his head seemed much too large. As you know, he was a world famous scientist, but when he was born in March 1879, he was a very normal child, and mother was thinking on the contrary very weak, whether he would be able to complete the school or not. She was worried because his head was bigger than other students, other boys and girls. It was bigger, little big. Second para. At the age of 2.5, Einstein still wasn't talking. When he finally did learn to speak, he uttered everything twice. Einstein did not know what to do with other children, and his playmates called him Brother Boring. So the youngster played by himself much of the time. He especially loved mechanical toys, looking at his newborn sister Maja. He said to have said, "Fine, but where are her wheels?" As you know, he was when 2.5 years old. He was still that time he was not talking, and he was uttering everything twice. So he was not comfortable with other peer group. Other children of his age were calling him boring, brother, boring. So Einstein himself was playing all the time, and he loved his own sister. That is, but he was asking the question, where are her wheels? I mean, his mind was such mechanical. He was considering her sister as a toy because all the toys were going on wheels. So he was considering that sister also a toy. Where are her wheels? On page 47, next paragraph. A headmaster once told his father that what Einstein chose as a profession wouldn't matter because he will never make a success at anything. Einstein began learning to play the violin at the age of 6 because his mother wanted him to. He later became a gifted amateur violinist, maintaining this skill throughout his life. Now, dear students, you will be surprised to know a headmaster or principal called father of Einstein, and they said that no matter whatever profession your son will choose, definitely he will be failure. He will not success at any cost. So here we get the message that particularly for the teachers and elders, parents alike, that we should not pass the judgment. This is something wrong. You are doing injustice to that particular child, to that particular boy or a girl, that you can't do anything. Who are you to say this? Almighty Allah has not given you authority. He may be excelled in other area, sports, kinesthetic energy, or other. So many skills are there, so many mindset are there. So who are you to say that you cannot be successful? Nobody knows except Almighty Allah how much this man or that girl will be successful in the future. So I think this is very wrong on the side of a teacher, parents, elders, everyone, to pass the judgment as Einstein's principal passed the judgment headmaster that your son will be failure. Then he learned violinist, and he was amateur violinist, and he maintained this kind of his habit throughout his life. Next paragraph, paragraph number 4 on page 47. But Albert Einstein was not a bad pupil. He went to high school in Munich, where Einstein's family had moved when he was 15 months old and scored good marks in almost every subject. Einstein hated the school's regimentation excuse me and often clashed with his teachers. At the age of 15, Einstein felt so stifled there that he left the school for good. As you know, when he was 15 months old, they moved to Munich along with his family. But when he turned to 15 years old, he was always having clashes with the teacher, because since he himself was a genius and teacher could not understand his mind, his intelligence, so there were always both were uncomfortable, teacher as well as Einstein. So he left the school for good. He said, I will no more go to the school, because only clashes were there. Next paragraph. Fifth, the previous year Albert's parents had moved to Milan and left their son and relatives. After prolonged discussion, Einstein got his wish to continue his education in German-speaking Switzerland, in city which was more liberal than Munich. As you know that Albert's in the previous year, Albert's parents moved to the Milan, and they lived Einstein to another their relatives. So we can say that Einstein continued his education in German-speaking Switzerland city. In the Switzerland, he continued his education. Next para 6. Einstein was highly gifted in mathematics and interested in physics. After finishing his school, he decided to study at a university at Zurich. But science wasn't the only thing that appealed to the dashing young man with walrus mustache. As you know, Einstein was highly gifted in mathematics and he was interested in subject physics. So after finishing his higher secondary school, he decided to study at University of Zurich. But this was not only science was thing that was appealing or interesting to him. He was very dashing young man with a walrus mustache. That was his personality. Next page 48. He also felt a special interest in a fellow student, Mileva Maric, whom he found to be a clever creature. The young Serb had come to Switzerland because the university in Zurich was one of the few in Europe where women could get degrees. Einstein saw in her an ally against the Philistines and those people in his family and in the university with whom he was constantly at odds. The couple fell in love. Letters survive in which they put their affection into words, mixing science with tenderness. Wrote Einstein, "How happy and proud I shall be when we both have brought our work on relativity to a victorious conclusion." So he said when he was studying in Switzerland, he met one class fellow, namely Mileva Maric, whom according to Einstein, she was very clever and lovely creature. She was from Serb. She has come to make the research, and a few women were allowed at that time in the University of Switzerland. So he was in love with that girl, and very beautiful. In a letter, we find that he has written that how happy and proud I shall be when we both have brought our work on relativity to victorious conclusion. So he has mixed science with a tender emotion, unlike that sometimes scientists are very dry, or it is being said that they are not having emotion, but Einstein was not among that. He was emotional as well as he was appealing science along with the literature. Here the word Philistines, it is used to disciplinarily talk about the people who do not like art, literature or music. As I told you, the scientists are sometimes very rigid. I am not saying that they are not bad. Try to understand how their mind becomes mechanical sometimes. Here I would like to give one practical example where one senior we can say one very very senior professor has shared with me. He said that one of his friend who was a very good scientist in chemistry, a renowned scientist, he was working somewhere. So what happened at that point of time, he was there, and the person who has shared this with me, he was also in that house because he was friend. Both of them were scientists. He is also professor who has shared with me. He is a senior friend of mine, and he was there. So all of a sudden, the wife of a scientist, she came, and she was weeping. So this scientist asked what happened. She said, my brother has died. Please come, we both will go together. So this scientist said, what the hell you are going to do? If I go along with you, will he become alive? So such mechanical emotions. And the person who has shared this with this me, he was also sitting there. So he was also wonderstruck to see the emotions of this his friend. So he's talking about that. Einstein is talking about that. Einstein was not like that. He was loving art, music, literature, all these skills. Did you understand this point? I hope you did. Next paragraph on page 48. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert Einstein was a university graduate and unemployed. He worked as a teaching assistant, gave private lessons, and finally secured a job in 1902 as a technical expert in the patent office in Bern. While he was supposed to be assessing other people's inventions, Einstein was actually developing his own ideas in secret. He is said to have jokingly called his desk drawer at work of Bureau of Theoretical Physics. As you know, a patent, as you know, the document which gave the rights of invention. Even we have so many patents in India, and America also got so many patents. You can also make research and invent your new product and apply for the patent. You will get it. This Einstein was working in the 1902. He got the job as a technical expert to look to the product whichever have come for the patent. But he himself was also developing his own theory. So he jokingly call his a desk driver as a Bureau of Theoretical Physics. Next para on page 48. One of the famous papers of 1905 was Einstein's special theory of relativity, according to which time and distance are not absolute. Indeed, two perfectly accurate clocks will not continue to share the same time if they come together again after a journey. If one of them has been moving very fast relative to the other, from this followed the world's most famous formula, which describes the relationship between mass and energy, that is E is equal to mc square. The mathematical equation: E stands for energy, m for mass, and c for the speed of the light in a vacuum, that is approximately 3 lakh kilometer per second. When you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it seems like 2 minutes. When you sit on a hot stove for 2 minutes, it seems like 2 hours. That's relativity. Now in this particular time, you might have come across in your own life, there are certain cousins, relatives, friends with whom you feel, even if you stay or pass the time with them 5 hours, you seem that only 5 minutes have passed. Okay, and there might be some kind of people in your life, maybe relative, maybe friend, maybe distant relative, or whatever may be the case. And if you sit with them only for 5 minutes, you will see the time is not passing. For 5 minutes I am listening, I am sitting here for the last 5 hours. So exactly this is called theory of relativity. For understanding, Einstein he himself has given the example. If you can you pass the time with the things you are interested, your time will pass very fast. And if you do the things you are not interested, you don't love to do the things, time will not pass. That is the simple formula. On page 49, next paragraph 10. While Einstein was solving the most difficult problems in physics, his private life was unraveling. Albert had wanted to marry Mileva right after finishing his studies, but his mother was against it. She thought Mileva, who was 3 years older than her son, was too old for him. She was also bothered by Mileva's intelligence. She is a book like you, his mother said. Einstein put the wedding off. Now, the problem with scientists is that they are very choosy, and they are, we can say, they are very eccentric. Eccentric means lahri, as we can call it in Hindi, moody. So Einstein was very firm. He was loving to that Mileva, right? He wanted to marry that lady after finishing studies, but the problem was that she was 3 years older than Albert Einstein. So Einstein's mother was deadly against, because she was bothered about the intelligence. She said she is a book like you. So directly our Einstein has put marriage off. So here also again I will share you another scientist from India who did the same thing. Whole life he worked for research, and who didn't get married, and who was our president of India once upon a time. You can name that scientist, after finishing the chapter you write answer that question and send it on my personal number. Next para on same page 49. The pair finally married in January 1903 and had 2 sons, but a few years later the marriage faltered. Mileva, meanwhile, was losing her intellectual ambition and becoming an unhappy housewife. After years of constant fighting, the couple finally divorced in 1919. Einstein married his cousin Elsa the same year. As you know, even the scientists have the same problem, common like me and you and other common men's problem. The final married in 1913, this couple married, and they had 2 sons. But as you know, both of them were intellectual. So she was thinking that her career has been just stopped, and she has become simple housewife, as she was very ambitious and scientist. So they were always having a fighting or clashes where their marital discord, as we call it in English language, marital discord was there. The finally couple have decided to be divorced in 1919, and in the same year he married his cousin Elsa. Next para on the same page. Einstein's new personal chapter coincided with his rise to world fame. In 1915, he had published his central theory of relativity, which provided a new interpretation of gravity. An eclipse of the sun in 1919 brought proof that it was accurate. Einstein has correctly calculated in advance the extent to which the light from fixed stars would be deflected through the sun's gravitational field. The newspapers proclaim his work as a scientific revolution. As you know, Einstein, who published the paper in 1915, it is a general theory of relativity in which he has made the calculation of the solar eclipse, and when it was done, it was they find that it was totally scientific, it was totally correct. Einstein has correctly calculated in advance before solar eclipse has actually happened. So it has the whole people come to know the genius and talent of Albert Einstein. All the newspaper proclaim that his work as a scientific revolution. Here remember one thing, before it happened, that solar eclipse, nobody has paid attention to the work of Albert Einstein, but when it actually happened, as he has calculated correctly, after solar eclipse they calculated it was exactly same as Einstein has calculated before it happened. So everybody came to know about the talent of Albert Einstein. The same page on next para. Einstein received Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. He was showered with honors and invitation from all over the world and lauded by the press. As you know, he got very prestigious honorable Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921, and he became the world famous personality and very famous world famous figure in the world in the press. On the same page, next para. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, Einstein immigrated to the United States. 5 years later, the discovery of nuclear fission in Berlin had American physicists in an uproar. Many of them had fled from fascism, just as Einstein had, and now they were afraid the Nazis could build and use of atomic bomb. As you know, and the country passes through upheavals, political upheaval, and Nazis means who was the leader? Hitler. So he was deadly against the Jew, and Einstein was a Jew, and he said that all the Jews should leave the Germany. So so many scientists and intellectuals, they left Germany for USA. In the same way, our Einstein also did the same thing, and they were afraid that the Nazis could use an atomic bomb in a war. Page 50, first para, 15. At the urging of a colleague, Einstein wrote a letter to American President Franklin D. Roosevelt on 2nd August 1939, in which he warned a single bomb of this type exploded in a port might very well destroy the whole port together with some of the surrounding territory. His words did not fail to have an effect. The Americans developed the atomic bomb in a secret project of their own and dropped it on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 in the Second World War. As you know, Einstein, he was a very good human being. On a request from his friend, he write to the then President of America, USA, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was very famous, on August 1939, that he said a single bomb of this type in a port will destroy the whole port together without the surrounding territory. It is so powerful. So his words have an impact on Franklin D. Roosevelt. They themselves begin to work on atomic bomb secretly, and whole world knows that they have not only developed but they have successfully exploded on Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 in the Second World War, and everybody knows the bad and worst effect of this atomic bomb. On the same page, 16 para, next para, Einstein was deeply shaken by the extent of the destruction. This time he wrote a public missive to the United Nations. In it he proposed the formation of a world government. Unlike the letter to Roosevelt, this one made no impact. But over the next decade, Einstein got ever more involved in politics, agitating for an end of arms build-up and using his popularity to campaign for peace and democracy. As you know, as such a world-famous figure, and who has been given Nobel Prize, he wrote one letter in which he said that world government should be the one like United Nations. But this time his letter was having no impact. Okay, when he wrote the letter to Roosevelt, it was having the impact, but here it was not like that. But in the next decade he became more active in the politics, but not for the power, for the against using arm building up and using agitation or using atomic bomb. He was deadly against it, and he was very active. He was promoting peace and democracy. For that reason he was actively involved in the politics. Last para on same page. When Einstein died in 1955 at the age of 76, he was celebrated as a visionary and world citizen as much as a scientific genius. And as you can know, such a great scientist has gone from this world in 1955 when he was 76 years old. So he was celebrated as a visionary, world citizen, as well as a scientific genius. So many scientists are there, but they hardly care about the social status, about the social atmosphere, emotional status. But this was we can say that almost the first scientist who was a scientist genius, but always he was giving weightage to emotional status of human being. So we can say that Alhamdulillah, such a great personality, we can learn lot of things from such great scientists and apply in our life, and we can become successful. He was a very good human being. He was emotional, and he was against the using arms and atomic bomb, and he was always promoting peace and democracy. So here we end the chapter, and you listen and again listen. The words are given by the side of the textbook. You read and listen to this video. After that, write down question and answer, and I suggest you, I instruct you to read 2 times, 3 times, and write down question and answer that has been given, and write down the correct question and answer with the spellings, and send it on my personal WhatsApp number. Thank you. Jazakallah.